Hi guys, I'm going to record a sample Pecha Kucha presentation for you to see, and it's going to be a little bit about Emmett Till, who we are going to read about. Imagine this, you're a confident teenager living in a place where your biggest concerns are fashion, music, or dating. Then you travel to visit a relative in a different part of the country, and when you get there you're not even allowed to go into certain places or talk to some people. I think that would seem really unfair. However, this is a situation that most black teens found themselves in whenever they went from the north to the south. For Emmett Till specifically, he was going from Chicago to Mississippi, and he was definitely in for a culture shock. So life in the South in the 1940s and 50s was a world away from life in the North. In the South, Jim Crow laws ruled, and black people lived in fear of harassment or worse every single day. Though the North wasn't perfect, Northern black teenagers didn't really understand the race rules that existed in the South, and they didn't know how to act in a society that hated them so much. So Emmett Till lived in Chicago, where the living conditions, though cramped and humble, were all right. Black businesses thrived, and the black community could rely on itself for all of its needs. Even though he did live in the North, blacks and whites were totally segregated. They lived in different parts of town. However, unlike the South, the black communities led a fairly normal life. So Emmett Till had family in Greenwood, Mississippi, which is part of the Deep South. So in Greenwood, the economy was controlled completely by the white people. So black people were entirely dependent on whites for their jobs. And in the South, white people promoted racial etiquette. And if black people didn't follow racial etiquette, they would be persecuted and sometimes even killed. As such, blacks in the South were first forced to work for really low wages, for usually unfair bosses. So despite being free for almost a century, black people were still subservient in the South. Next, I'm going to read you a quote from a man named Leon Finney, who was a reverend at this time period, and he says, "I do remember being in Mississippi with my grandfather. I went to try on this hat. Because I'm from Chicago, I didn't know the difference. I thought if you could buy a hat in Chicago, you could put it on to see if it fit you. My grandfather said, no, 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 no. The Mississippi sales clerk had to put a tape around my head and measured my head to see that it was the right size, and then we could buy the hat. That same kind of phenomenon would never have happened in Chicago. If you wanted to buy a hat, you just tried the hat on, and that was it." In conclusion, civil liberties were being denied everywhere. However, life for blacks was a lot more dangerous in the South than in the North. When Emmett Till journeyed from Chicago down to Mississippi, he had no idea of how he would be seen and treated there. And I think that Emmett Till's tragic story proves that the consequences for breaking the social etiquette in the South were definitely severe and entirely inhuman. Thanks.